You know, he's amazing. He's so supportive. We're both supportive of each other.
It's so cliche, but we just really like each other. We're most happy in each other's company, and we make each other laugh.
28 years married to Warren Beatty. That's amazing.
Thank you very much.
21 couples, more than 1,000 years of marriage between them, give or take, and every one of them managed to do the one thing Hollywood is famously not supposed to be able to do. They stayed. What you are about to hear is not about red carpets or awards, because it is about the ordinary, unglamorous, deeply human business of choosing the same person.
For more than 50 years, Paul Newman was married to Joanne Woodward, a love story almost unheard of in Hollywood.
Over and over for 38 years, or 50 years, or 69 years.
In a couple of days, it'll be 58 years.
Wow.
Yeah.
Through illness, through grief, through the kind of pressure that quietly ends most marriages, long before the 5th anniversary. And 2 of these couples said goodbye very recently, and what was said afterward is genuinely the reason I made this video. If you love stories told with real warmth and real respect, hit subscribe. Michael J. Fox and Tracy Pollan.
I'm not sure I communicated all that well, but it's humbling in the deepest way to stand here and accept your kindness and your approbation.
We are starting with the couple who got the worst news of their lives 3 years in and came out closer than they went in.
I'm 22, and my energy's right now focused on my career and on just trying to set up the base.
Michael met Tracy in 1985 on the set of Family Ties, where she played his girlfriend and nothing happened because they were both seeing other people.
I love you, all right? I love you, I love you, I love you.
2 years later, they were put together again on a film called Bright Lights, Big City. And when somebody mentioned that Tracy was now single, Michael's reaction was, in his own words, that is too bad. Where's the phone? They married in July of 1988 at a country inn in Vermont, right at the height of Back to the Future. And then in 1991, at 29, Michael was diagnosed with Parkinson's.
Fox was diagnosed with Parkinson's disease in 1991. He was just 29 years old.
Yeah, I mean, I won't lie, it's getting harder. It's getting harder. It's getting tougher. Every day gets tougher. But that's the way it is. I mean, who do I see about that?
Tracy has described what they built after that in 5 words. It was us against the world. And when you ask her for the secret, she does not say love. She says they listen to each other, and then they give each other space. Tom Hanks and Rita Wilson. They met years before anything happened back in 1981, when Rita guest starred on Bosom Buddies and Tom was married to somebody else. So they became friends and left it there. But when they were cast together again in 1985 on a film called Volunteers, something shifted. And the way Tom describes it is my favorite line here. He says they looked at each other and it was, quote, kaboing. And that was that. What almost nobody tells you is what happened when he proposed. Because Rita did not melt and she did not cry. She blurted out, "You bet." And he loved it so much that he had those 2 words engraved inside her wedding ring, where they still sit today. They married in April of 1988 in a Greek Orthodox cathedral after Tom converted to her faith. 2 sons and 1 frightening spring in 2020 later, Tom sums it up the same way. They just like each other. You start there. Tom Selleck and Jillie Mack. In 1983, Tom Selleck was the most recognizable man on American television, and he was sitting in a London theater watching the musical Cats, which would be perfectly normal if he had not gone back roughly 8 times. He was not there for the music. He was there for a dancer in the cast named Jillie Mack, who he later called the personification of joy. And when her contract ended, she moved across the world to Hawaii, where Magnum was filming, and even turned up on the show. Their wedding in August of 1987 was pure espionage, held in a tiny chapel near Lake Tahoe under fake names, and the man performing the ceremony did not find out who he was marrying until minutes before it began. Then Tom did the thing Hollywood still talks about, walking away from the biggest show on television at the absolute peak of it. And his reason was 1 sentence long. He quit to have a family. On his 80th birthday, cameras caught the 2 of them walking to dinner hand in hand, Jamie Lee Curtis and Christopher Guest. Jamie Lee Curtis fell in love with her husband before she had ever met him, which sounds invented until you hear how it happened. In 1984, she was flipping through a magazine and stopped on a photograph of a man in character for a mockumentary about a rock band, and she pointed and announced that she was going to marry that guy. She left her number with his agent, and he never called. So she moved on, and then weeks later, the 2 of them ended up in the same Los Angeles restaurant, spotted each other across the room, and neither one said a word. They just waved. He phoned the next day, and 6 months after that, they married at a friend's home on what she still remembers as a rainy Tuesday afternoon at 4:30. They adopted 2 daughters after struggling to have children. She got sober, and he simply stayed. Her advice on marriage is the bluntest line here. You do not leave, she says, because if you stay on the bus, the scenery changes. Sam Elliott and Katharine Ross. The first time these two were in the same room, in 1969 on the set of Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid, she was the leading lady, and he was so far down the call sheet that he did not dare open his mouth. He described himself later as a shadow on the wall, a glorified extra in a bar scene, and said all he could do was watch her come and go. 9 years passed before he got another chance, when they were cast together in a horror film in London, and once her marriage ended, he made his move. They married in the spring of 1984, and their daughter Cleo arrived a few months later. And there is a beautiful detail from that moment, because he was offered the role that would change his career and told his agent no since he was on his honeymoon. Katharine phoned that agent back the same night and promised she would have her husband there in time. She got him there. He got the part. Ozzy and Sharon Osbourne. Sharon was 18 the first time she met him, because her father managed his band and there was nothing romantic about it for years. Then his career collapsed, and she was the one who picked the pieces up, became his manager, and rebuilt the whole thing from nothing. They married in Hawaii on the 4th of July in 1982, both dressed head to toe in white, which for those two was practically a costume, and he chose that date so he would never have an excuse to forget the anniversary. What followed was 43 years of the loudest marriage in music, with 3 children, 1 separation, and every headline the tabloids could throw at them. And yet Sharon always put it the same way. They never gave up on each other, because they were simply meant to be. Asked once what he was proudest of, he did not mention the records or the stadiums. He said it was having a marriage that lasted. He played his farewell show in July of 2025, and 17 days later, he was gone. A year on, Sharon told the BBC she wants people to remember not the chaos, but how funny he was. Denzel and Pauletta Washington. He had to propose 3 separate times, which tells you almost everything about both of them. Denzel met Pauletta in 1977 on the set of his first screen role, reconnected with her at a party a year later, and then asked her to marry him, and she said no. He asked again, and she said no again. Pauletta tells the story herself now, laughing that she turned him down twice, and the third time they did it. Their 1983 wedding came with one small disaster, because they were so busy greeting everybody that the food ran out, and the couple ended up in a diner eating breakfast in the early hours. 4 decades later, when Denzel stood up in 2019 to accept one of the biggest honors of his career, he spent the speech talking about his wife instead of himself.
Most important person in my life. 40 years of sacrifice, 40 years of forgiveness. He taught me about faith, spirituality, love. I would not be alive without Pauletta Washington. I wouldn't be alive.
40 years of sacrifice, he said. 40 years of forgiveness. He said he would not be alive without her. And then, being Denzel, he gave a magazine the shorter version. He does what he is told, and he keeps his mouth shut. Samuel L. Jackson and LaTanya Richardson. They met around 1970 as 2 students at neighboring colleges in Atlanta, arguing about theater and about the world, and LaTanya has said they decided early that the most revolutionary thing they could do was stay together and raise their children. Their wedding in August of 1980 was chaos in the best possible way, because LaTanya had 23 bridesmaids, which meant Samuel had to find 23 men willing to stand beside them. Then in the late 80s, his life came apart, and it was LaTanya who refused to let him disappear into it and got him into a treatment program. He came out clean, and within weeks he was filming the role that made the world notice him. He has never pretended he did that alone, saying she gave him the chance to be the man he was supposed to be. Last summer, they celebrated 45 years in Caine. Jeff Bridges and Susan Geston. Montana, 1975. And Jeff Bridges walks into a hot springs resort where a young waitress is working with 2 black eyes and a broken nose from a car accident, and he falls for her instantly anyway. He asked her out, and she turned him down flat, telling him it was a small town and they would run into each other, and days later, they did exactly that at a wrap party and danced all night. Then came the part he admits was entirely his own fault, because he was terrified of marriage and stalled for 2 years until Susan told him to commit or let her go. He says what changed his mind was picturing himself as an old man, thinking about the girl in Montana he did not marry. He proposed, and they married days later in their own backyard. 3 daughters and 1 serious illness later. His advice is as blunt as you would hope. Do not get a divorce. He says that is key. Hers is even shorter. Keep it fun. Paul Newman and Joanne Woodward. This is the one everybody thinks of when you say lasting Hollywood Hollywood love, and the beginning is not what you would expect. They met in 1953 as understudies in a Broadway play, when he was still married to somebody else, and Joanne was not impressed by him because she thought he looked like an advertisement, a pretty face, and nothing more. 4 years later, they were cast opposite each other in a film, and whatever she had decided about him did not survive it, and they married in Las Vegas in January of 1958. Then they did the thing almost no famous couple does. They left. They bought a farmhouse in Connecticut and raised 3 daughters as far from the industry as they could get. That same year, she won an Academy Award in a dress she had sewn herself, the only Best Actress winner ever to do that. And when a reporter asked Paul how a man who looked like that stayed faithful, he gave the answer that outlived him. "Why go out for hamburger?" he said, "when I have steak at home." Ron Howard and Cheryl Howard. Now stay with me here, because from this point on, every couple has been married longer than most people watching have been alive. Ron Howard was 16 and already famous when he saw a girl at his high school in Burbank, and their first date in November of 1970 was a movie and a pizza in a Volkswagen Bug with a broken door handle and a heater that did not work. He met her, he says, and there was never anybody else after that. Even at the height of his fame, their 1975 wedding cost around $800 because Cheryl's father insisted on paying and she refused to let it get out of hand. And here's the detail almost nobody knows, because Cheryl has appeared in a tiny hidden cameo in very nearly every film he has ever directed. On their 50th anniversary, he wrote about paddling downriver together through calm water and some genuinely tricky rapids, and said the key was simply to keep paddling. Sissy Spacek and Jack Fisk. Jack had built a treehouse by a river and asked Sissy to come home with him by boat, and a flash flood came through and the boat sank, and she says that was the moment she knew life with this man would be eventful. She was right. Their 1974 wedding was held in a small California chapel. They wore blue jeans, and their only witness was his dog. They were so unsure it would last that they opened a bank account and put $30 into it, because $30 was what a divorce cost at the time. 52 years on, they have made 8 films together and raised 2 daughters on a horse farm, and her advice is 4 words long. Just pick your battles. She says you go through so many things together that it simply deepens and deepens and deepens. Michael Caine and Shakira Caine. He fell in love with his wife through a television screen, and I promise that is not an exaggeration. It was 1971. Michael Caine was watching a coffee commercial, and he saw a woman he genuinely believed was the most beautiful he had ever seen. The advert had a Brazilian theme, so he assumed she lived in Brazil and started working out how to fly there and find her, until a friend in advertising sat him down and explained that she lived a few miles away in London. So he called her every single day for 10 days. He freely admits she could not get rid of him on the telephone, and eventually she agreed to dinner, and they married in Las Vegas in January of 1973. And he has said something about her that I keep coming back to, because he was drifting badly when they met, and he believes she arrived in his life just in time. Billy Crystal and Janice Crystal. Summer of 1966. On a beach in Long Beach, New York, an 18-year-old Billy Crystal was messing around with a baseball when a girl walked past, and he stopped and asked his friend who on earth that was. Then, according to him, he said out loud that he was going to marry her, and 4 years later, he did. He transferred colleges just to stay near her, and in those early years, she earned the money while he drove out at night to do stand-up for almost nothing. 2 daughters, 4 grandchildren, and 56 years later, in January of 2025, the fires came through the Palisades, and their home was gone. He told a magazine they had been through all kinds of hard things, but that this was the most difficult thing imaginable, and that they were inching forward day by day. His formula for lasting is only 3 words long, and I genuinely think it is the best one here. Respect, humor, honesty. Christopher Walken and Georgianne Walken. He plays the strangest men in cinema and has quietly built one of the most ordinary marriages in it. They met in the mid-60s as 2 young dancers touring in West Side Story, and his description of that first meeting is as blunt as you would want, because he says she was a fox. She still is a fox, and they loved each other right away. They married in January of 1969 and built 2 careers that held each other up without either swallowing the other, because while he was winning an Academy Award, she was becoming an Emmy-winning casting director who cast her own husband in some of his biggest films, No Children, A Great Many Cats, and A Very Quiet House in Connecticut. And when somebody asked him what happiness actually feels like, he did not reach for anything grand at all. He said his bills are paid, his wife is healthy, the weather is nice, and that is really all he cares cares about, Ina Garten and Jeffrey Garten. She was 15, visiting her brother at college with absolutely no idea anybody was watching her. Jeffrey was up in the library window, and he looked down at her crossing the campus and said to his roommate, "Look at that girl. Is she not beautiful?" So he wrote to her, and he put a photograph of himself inside the envelope. And Ina still remembers running through her parents' house waving it and shouting, "Mom, you have got to see this picture. He is so cute." They married in December of 1968 when she was 20, and then he was posted overseas for a year and wrote to her every single day, managing to phone her once in 12 months. And here's the part people always miss, because they very nearly ended it in the 70s, and she has written that his willingness to sit down and do the work mattered as much as anything. Dolly Parton and Carl Dean. She had been in Nashville for a matter of hours, 18 years old, no money, and a bag of dirty laundry, which is how she ended up outside a laundromat on her first day in the city when a 21-year-old in a truck slowed down and hollered at her. And here's what she says struck her about him all these years later. While he was talking to her, he looked at her face. They dated 2 years and then slipped away to a tiny town in Georgia to marry in secret, with only her mother and the preacher and his wife there to see it, and she wore a little white dress and carried little flowers. The next morning, she got up early for a radio appearance, and he never once asked her not to go. He stayed out of every photograph for 6 decades, and she always said it worked because they were not in each other's face all the time. He passed in March of 2025 at 82, and she said words simply cannot do justice to what they shared. Then she said something braver. She said he is in God's arms now, and she is okay with that. Charlton Heston and Lydia Clarke. They met in a theater class at Northwestern around 1941, and he decided almost immediately that he was going to marry her, while she sensibly took much longer to come around. He bought her wedding ring for $12. They married in March of 1944 in a small church in North Carolina, and then shipped out to serve in the freezing Aleutian Islands, which meant their entire first stretch of married life happened through letters, and he wrote every single day. He came home and became one of the biggest movie stars on the planet, with his Oscar arriving 15 years into the marriage, by which point she was an accomplished Broadway actress herself. And in an industry practically built on scandal, there was never once a single one attached to his name. He was asked about that directly, and his answer was almost funny in how ordinary it was, because he said he never cheated and never even wanted to, for the simple reason that he happened to like his marriage. Martin Sheen and Janet Templeton. Their wedding in December of 1961 lasted 15 minutes, because they squeezed it into a New York church between a morning service and a funeral, which was the only gap they could get. He was a struggling actor from Ohio, she was an art student, and between them they had almost nothing. Then in 1979, out in the Philippines filming one of the most famous films ever made, everything nearly ended, because he was 36 when he had a heart attack and had to crawl to a road to find help. Janet flew straight to him, and as he was wheeled through the hospital, genuinely terrified, she leaned over him and whispered, "It is only a movie, babe. Please, it is only a movie." He once said he married the scariest woman he had ever met because she simply did not know how to lie. And for him, the truth had always been a sometimes thing. She would always call him out, he said. Thank God. Kirk Douglas and Ann Bidens. He was one of the most famous men alive, and she turned him down flat. It was Paris in 1953 when Kirk Douglas met a sharp, multilingual publicist on a film set and offered her first a job and then a glamorous dinner. And she said no to both because she would rather go home and scramble some eggs. He called her the most difficult woman he had ever met and could not stop thinking about her, and he later admitted what changed things, because he stopped talking about himself and started listening instead. They married in Las Vegas in May of 1954, with Frank Sinatra stopping his own show to be there, and Anne was so nervous, she promised to take Kirk as her awful wedded husband. The years that followed were not gentle, with his infidelity, her illness, his stroke, and the loss of their son, a grief no marriage should ever have to carry. They renewed those vows 50 years later, and his son Michael has said it out loud since. His father would never have had that career without Anne, Alan Alda, and Arlene Alda. And here we are at 69 years, the longest marriage still standing in Hollywood. And it began with a cake on a floor, Manhattan, 1956, at a dinner party, when a rum cake slid off the refrigerator and hit the kitchen tiles, and everybody in the room gasped and stepped back. 2 people got down with spoons and ate it anyway. He says they were inseparable after that, but he was gone long before the cake ever fell, because earlier in the meal he had heard her laughing at his jokes from the far end of the table, and his line about it is perfect. She had him at ha. They married in March of 1957 and raised 3 daughters, and through 11 years of the show that made him a household name, he flew home every single weekend, because his family came first and he never wavered on it. In 2015, he was diagnosed with Parkinson's, and she has been beside him every day since. words. Arlene is the one who gave the world the line, because she says a long marriage needs a short memory. And this spring, at 90, he said there is no subject the two of them cannot talk about now. Not aging, not the end. On his own health, he said he was making progress, then added, I did not say in which direction, 69 years, and she is still laughing at his jokes. When you line up everything these 21 couples actually said, the same 4 things keep surfacing, and not one of them is romantic. The first is a short memory, which is Arlene Alda's phrase for refusing to carry every old hurt forever. The second is friendship sitting underneath everything else, not passion, just genuinely liking the person, which Tom Hanks said plainest when he said you start there. The third is space, meaning enough room to stay a whole person inside a marriage. And the fourth is the truest, which is that you simply do not leave. None of these people got an easy life, because they got illness and grief and years apart, and what carried them through was never luck. It was a decision, made again and again, on an awful lot of very ordinary Tuesdays. Which one of these couples stayed with you the most? Drop their name in the comments right now, because I genuinely read every single one. And if this warmed your heart the way it warmed mine, subscribe before you go.